I've always had disordered eating habits since I was about 15 or 16. I basically used food to like physically suppress my feelings for 15 years. Diets don't heal your relationship with food. The problem is not your willpower. For a large majority of people, that is stemming from an emotional reason. When we're trying to actively control our body, that's when it's a lot harder to have a more intuitive relationship with food. Realistically, if you're thriving and you're healthy and you're fit, the rest of your life is great and you're enjoying your food, there's no problem there. The partner who my ex had after me, he was domestically violent towards her, physically violent towards her. So I wrote an email that was about that situation. This is actually what gaslighting looks like, and this is what sexual abuse looks like, and all of these things. I wish that I'd read it. I wish someone had said to me, that's actually, you're being abused here. And I wish someone had said that to me. This girl who's a couple of years younger than me messaged me and she said, I know who that's about and this is what happened to me and I'm in therapy. And the guilt that I felt for that was huge, because I just thought, if I hadn't been so quiet, then maybe she would have reached out to me and maybe that wouldn't have happened to her.
Emilia, welcome on the show.
Thanks.
We obviously met properly at IFS last summer in Portugal. Mm-hmm. IFS friends. And we had some wicked chats, and you have a super interesting journey. So I wanted to get you here and delve in a bit deeper, peel it all back and see what's behind there.
Okay, I feel quite nervous.
Don't worry.
You can always see it in my body language too. I kind of just start to recoil. I'm like, oh gosh.
I think every time I record these, the first 5 minutes, everyone's a bit stiff, everyone's really tense. And then after that, you like think, oh, this actually wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
I don't know
why.
All
good. It's all good.
Feels like we're in trouble. We spoke about this in the car on the way here a little bit, but I always like to, so what would I need to know about your early years, your experience of your early years, your childhood, that might help me understand who you are today?
Where shall I start?
Start right at the beginning.
I think for me, so the job that I do now was never intentionally an outcome of my own situation. I never thought, this is my situation, I'm going to go into this job. But because of my background, it's kind of led me to this point inadvertently. So I've always had disordered eating habits since I was about 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. When I was 16 or so, my family went through a bit of small T trauma probably, and dissolved a little bit and grew into new ways of what a family might look like. And it's not a secret, but my dad now is in a relationship with another person. My mum is not. And at the time, it was quite a challenging time for our family. And what happened was, I kind of decided that I was 16, so I was really close with my mum. And I decided I was going to be the person that tried to hold everything together for everyone, as we do. And as a result of that, I didn't show any sort of feeling that was potentially like negative in any way. And obviously that's completely impossible not to feel anything that's potentially negative. And so as a result of that, I just found myself using food to kind of suppress any of those feelings. So I struggled with binge eating disorder. Probably there was no diagnosis for me. I only know now as an educated person what that looks like. But I basically used food to like physically suppress my feelings for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't ever know that's what I was doing until I hit my 30s. I thought I had an issue with food. I thought I had an issue with my body. I was a millennial. Well, I'm a millennial, right? So I grew up with Kate Moss was my idol, saying nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. So I always thought I was just struggling with my food because I wanted to be skinny. And it was so surface level. Now I know better. I know that there's nothing really to do with that stuff. And so for 15 years, I struggled with binge eating in some way, shape or form. Maybe I'd have spells where it was a bit better, but like they didn't really go away. And then I found bodybuilding, which basically took all of my disordered eating habits and put them in this like little box that said, oh, get a trophy for your disordered eating habits. Like, let's do this. Let's celebrate it. And so that's what I did for 4 years. I struggled with my relationship with food all the way through bodybuilding, but I competed. I came second in Britain. Like I was really good at it. I was really into it. But as I was competing, it was when fitness was really like, you remember the days of like fitness being really bro. I mean, it still is, right? But like meal plans, you said in the car that you used to weigh your food and stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I was heavily into all that.
Exactly, right? So it was those times. And so I did my first show with a coach and I struggled with binge eating after it. And I was like, why is this eating disorder kind of symptom? Why have they come back all of a sudden? I've just competed. I think my first show I came top 5 and I was really happy. And I was like, why am I still struggling? My body's really lean. And then at this point, I was a lecturer in sport nutrition, right? So I've got like 9 years of academic study in that area, a PhD, a master's. I knew all the science, and yet I was still struggling, and I had a lot of shame and I would never talk about what I was struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point I was like, right, I'm going to try and figure out what's actually going on. And I delved into like the science behind it. And I was like, oh, actually, this is quite normal after extreme diets. You can struggle with all of these things. And I started writing blog posts and talking about it. And then people were kind of crawling out the woodwork and like, oh, this happened to me as well. And at that time in fitness, it was like no one would ever say they would binge eat. It would be so shameful that you didn't have any willpower. And then, yeah, I kind of realized that competing was just masking all of this other stuff. Came out of competing.
How old are you now when you come out of competing?
31. So
Okay.
5 years ago.
So you were competing quite recently?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, good times. And I only stopped really because I was 31 and the girl who beat me at British finals was 10 years younger than me. A lot of the girls, I'm not saying her, but a lot of the girls were on drugs. And I was like, if I want to compete at that level as a 32-year-old, what that would require is obscene. And looking back, I shouldn't have kept on competing anyway, and I probably would have quit anyway. But the external validation obviously kind of kept me going a little bit because
It's quite late now, isn't it, 31?
yeah.
And excuse me for what I'm about to say, but especially for a female
Yeah, for sure.
to compete.
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is too, at that time I was in a really abusive relationship. So really emotionally abusive relationship. And he was a bodybuilder. And for me, the thing with dieting and disordered eating is that it's your way of trying to regulate something when you're dysregulated in yourself. Like you're not dealing with stuff. And so food, body, stuff is a way of feeling like you've got some sort of control. And for me, bodybuilding was like the ultimate control. Every week was like, I'm this many weeks out of a show, or I'm this many weeks post-show, and this is what my cardio looks like, and this is what my macros look like. And it was so rigid that I didn't have to deal with the fact that I was in a really toxic relationship. And he was in the same industry, so there was that side of things, like that was complicated too. And it wasn't until I ended that relationship and I kind of fled that relationship, went to California on my own and kind of discovered like spirituality and meditation stuff, that I really realized, oh, actually, none of that was to do with food. All of that was because I was too afraid to cry. I didn't cry for like 2 years.
Wow.
It was wild, especially given the relationship I was in. I should have been crying all the time. But I didn't, because I didn't think it was okay for me to feel anything but positive, because that role that I had of just being this person who was going to hold everything together and make everyone else happy. And it was only when I realized that's what I was doing that year that all of my relationship with food started to improve like drastically. Never went back to compete and never dieted again. Never used food in that way again. Like I'll still have moments, but it completely changed.
It's a tough one, that, because we spoke about in the car, that the bodybuilding, I feel like was big in our era because we're very similar age.
Yeah.
I think, was it when Jersey Shore came out for me?
God.
Do you remember that show?
Yeah, of course I do. Wow.
I think when Jersey Shore came out, I want to say I even changed my name on Facebook to tie the situation to Mel on. And we'd eat Nando's 5 times a day, and it was always just GTL, whatever it was. Was it GTL? I can't remember what the terms were, but training, carbing up, dieting. Let's take it back a little bit. So I'm trying to delve into that bit about the fixing stuff you got going on. That's come from very early, right?
Yeah.
And has that come from because of your mum and dad's relationship, do you think?
I think there's a couple of things. I think I think mostly I always thought it was to do with my mum and dad's relationship and certain things that were modelled in that relationship. And I have a great relationship with them both now. I've got complete respect. But I always thought it was that. And actually what happened was I went on a psychedelic
retreat?
Yeah, like it wasn't even a retreat. It was when I was in Mexico, like with a meditation, yoga, psychedelic situation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like this big, heavy thing, but I went back to the time where what I thought was the reason for all of this identity that I had. And it wasn't that at all. It was more, I remembered a specific point where I'd seen my mum upset, and it took me back to that point where I thought, it was like I was in that moment saying, it's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. And I was like, that's the moment that I've kind of internalized as my identity of like, I'm just going to make it all okay because she was upset. And that, it's funny that it's like the smallest moments. Sometimes I think people think, oh, I've not had any trauma in my life and nothing's ever happened. But it's like, do you know what? The actual situation between my parents on paper might look like a bigger deal, but it wasn't that. It was just that tiny little moment where I resolved to myself, this is the role that I'm going to have. I'm going to rescue everyone else in this role. And it's really being a martyr, which I don't really like. But at 16, you just do what feels right at the time, right? And then you just internalize it.
It's an amazing thing to have that young, though. You know, at 16, most people don't know whether they're coming or going. You're trying to like help people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I was actually helping people. I think I was. I hope I was, but I don't know.
What psychedelics did you do? Mushrooms?
Mushrooms, yeah.
Have you done them again since?
I think that was the last time. I've done them a couple of times, but that was the one time that I found them really like quite transformative.
I haven't done any yet. I want to. They're kind of like, everyone I speak to is, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit afraid to be in my own head.
Yeah.
Because you can't get out. So
yeah, but
all those fears and all that, I don't know whether it's like guilt or things you've done as you're growing up and all the stuff in there. I kind of want to deal with it, but I also want to be able to step back out if it's too much.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not going to be able to, that journey is what it is once you're in, isn't you?
Yeah, but I think it's obviously like dependent on the space that you're doing it in and the headspace that you're in. You have to be in the right headspace for it. But also I think there are extremes. And so obviously people will say like ayahuasca is the way to do it and go really in. And I haven't done that. That terrifies me. I think for me, it wasn't like this really, it wasn't a really big dose of mushrooms. It wasn't like this hugely transformative thing, but it was just enough for me to tap into it a little bit. And I'm a meditation teacher and I meditate every day. So for me to get into a meditation is quite easy anyway. So that kind of, I think that added to the whole thing.
You meditate every day?
Yeah.
How long for?
So recently,
I
was doing my, I know, 2 minutes. When I did my meditation teacher training last year, and for that we had to do like half an hour unguided meditation every morning or every day. And so I got into the routine of doing half an hour every day now, and I would do that in the morning, and I would do like a guided one to help me sleep at night. So that's another 10, 20 minutes at night. Now I probably do about 15 to 20 minutes of something every day, plus yoga, and I've just started doing some breath work stuff as well. So I try and do about half an hour of something, like a couple of different things in one day.
I just find it hard to find the time sometimes. Like, I enjoy training twice a day.
Oh my gosh, there's your problem right there.
So I enjoy doing something in the morning, probably like a cardio-based, a run, a sea dip, something like that. And then I enjoy maybe a weight session or something else in the afternoon. And I feel like if I do both, it keeps my head in check. The morning one sets me up for the day, and about 2, 3, 4 o'clock, I'll start to fall off a bit into like a weird space, and then I train again, and I'm kind of reset for the evening.
Yeah.
Meditating, I started, like everyone, lockdown 1, I started everything. I tried journaling, meditating, what else was there? Reading, running, all this kind of stuff, sea dips. The meditation one was a tough one because I felt like I was rushing it. I felt like I was just doing it for the sake of doing it. And the few times that I did it that I feel like was correct, it was incredible. I felt like I was floating.
Yeah.
But I can't seem to get into that state very often.
But the point is, it's all correct. Even when you're not in that state, it's still correct because that's kind of the point of what you're doing, like why you're doing it. One of my clients said to me, meditation is like doing reps for your brain. And so every time your mind wanders and you come back to that moment, you're strengthening your brain. And she said as soon as she reframed it like that, it was like, it wasn't pointless when her mind was wandering because her brain was getting stronger, even though her brain was really loud. And I quite like that framing of it. Realistically, to get into that second level of like consciousness, you kind of do have to sit for about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to really get a bit deeper. But there's so many good guided sessions and stuff that you can do now that help. I think meditation, I don't think 100% of people should do it. I think there's certain things like ADHD, neurodivergent people, some people with like complex trauma, etc. That can be quite difficult, and you have to be trauma informed to do that. But on the whole, I think everyone should be doing some sort of meditation practice.
And that doesn't necessarily mean sitting with your legs crossed going,
No.
You see what I mean? Because when you think meditation, that's the first thing that comes to your mind. But like even just taking a few minutes of stillness to think. I actually do, this is going to sound weird, but I do a lot of my thinking in the shower.
Yeah.
Because it's the only time, I guess it sounds really bad, but I haven't got my phone attached to me. No one can get hold of me. There or driving in the car.
Yeah.
They're the two times where I think like, kind of have the creative ideas, my mind wanders a little bit and I come back.
And running too. Would you get it with running, or do you run in groups, wouldn't you?
Running, it's a weird, if I'm running on my own, yes, but we tend to run in groups because we use it as a bit more of a social thing than an actual, unless we're training for something in particular.
Yeah.
But the run generally, like the Saturday 5Ks we do, sometimes there's 20, 30 people there.
Yeah, okay.
So you're chatting, you're sort of talking, it's not the same.
But don't you think it's wild to think how little time you spend with your own thoughts? Like that to me scares me when I think you don't want to be ruminating and you don't want to be on your own with your thoughts all the time and overplaying things. But on the flip side of that, so many of us are so caught in doing all of the time. One day you're going to wake up and think, I don't even remember doing half of that stuff. And I'm now 50, 60, 70 years old, and all the way through my 30s, I was answering text messages. And it's like, I'm all about text messages. I'm 36 years old.
You're showing your age.
That's horrible.
For you youngsters, that's like an old version of WhatsApp.
Oh, yeah. But that does worry me, because I think as I started practicing mindfulness, like 5 or 6 years ago, even my memory and things have improved in the sense of I just remember moments. I remember what that moment felt like in my body. I remember what that moment smelt like. And I remember the connection or the love that I felt in those moments. And for me, that's what I want to remember when I'm going to die. Like those are the things that I think are important, not how many messages are replied to.
It's that presence piece we were talking about in the car, right? Being present. And that's something that I kind of need to work on, because I feel like I'm always... all of us, a lot of us probably would agree with this. You're kind of always on the go. We're always chasing something, but I don't really know what I'm chasing. Like I'm what's next? What's next? What's next? I don't know where it ends. Even for me, I take a moment to think and I think I've kind of got everything I would ever need. I've got more than 99% of the planet. Mm-hmm. And it's still doesn't feel like it's enough sometimes.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, here we go. The doctor's in session. I don't know. There must be an underlying something that's kind of probably making me feel not whole, not content, not full, but I don't know what that is. And I've done loads of work with therapists. Some of it, as I said to you in the car, was from trying to fit in as a kid, and a load of it kind of drags through, but I don't really know. I sometimes think if I sold everything now and left and went and lived on a beach somewhere with no shoes on, one of those ones, it'd be so peaceful.
Yeah.
But then I think my brain is such an attention seeker. Could I slow it down that much at this age? I don't know if I could. It would want something. Like I couldn't retire. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I need routine.
Yeah.
I need structure. I need systems in place. And
purpose, right? We all need purpose. One of the main reasons we struggle is without not having a purpose, which you probably don't have if you're bare feet. But then maybe on the beach. But maybe you would. I don't know.
Do you think you've found your purpose?
Yeah.
What's
I'm
your
pretty
purpose?
confident in that. This is really cliche, but I genuinely think that my job and supporting people to feel at peace with themselves is my purpose. And I want to do that as long as I can and with as many people as I can, because I think for me, it's really obvious. My job combines like where I'm really good in terms of book smarts and science and my own spirituality and my own journey. I'm really lucky that it's all come together in this way. It feels so authentic that I don't go into any situation where I think I'm not supposed to be here. I mean, in terms of maybe if I'm speaking at IFS or whatever, maybe if I'm speaking on stage about certain things, I get that imposter feeling. But with my main job of helping people with their relationships with food and their bodies, I think I genuinely believe I'm one of the best people to do that. And I'm not a super confident person. So that's not coming from like an outspoken place. That's genuinely because it feels so authentic to me.
Do you never battle with yourself? So I do a lot of fundraising, a lot of charity stuff. I'm an ambassador for a mental health charity. Do a lot of public speaking and on that kind of stuff. And I like helping people because I like how it makes me feel. But I have this battle in my head of, am I doing it because I'm genuinely a good person and I genuinely want someone to do well? Or am I doing it because I like the feeling of people thinking I'm a good person, or thinking I'm helping people. Do you see what I mean?
For sure. I think it's both.
Because you said earlier about that piece of trying to fix people, and that's your personality.
Yeah.
Well, you're effectively redoing it now.
Yeah, 100%.
But getting paid for it.
Yeah. Well, it actually came up in that mushroom session that I did, because I said that's really interesting and I'd never thought about it like that. So it's a good question. In that session, I said, well, what if I give up that identity of fixing? What does that mean for my entire career? And she said, well, then you'll be doing it from a place of love as opposed to a place of need. And the potential for coming from a place of love is infinitely more. And love is like one of my core values. And so I like that framing of it. So whenever I do have that battle, or have in the past, and I think, no, I'm doing this because out of love and care for predominantly women, everywhere. But do I not feel anything about it myself? Absolutely not. Of course I get a bit of validation.
Yeah.
Of course I get a bit of the fixer inside of me is like, yep, you've done that for today.
It's an incredibly fulfilling feeling. Nothing like I've felt before. But I don't know whether that's because I'm a raging narcissist or it's because I genuinely like people. I like to think it's the latter, but it is a battle that I'm fighting.
But we totally pathologize people pleasing and stuff now as if it's like the worst thing in the world. And for sure, if it's to your detriment, if I was overworking or you were overworking and it's to your detriment, it's impacting like other parts of your life, then yeah, that's probably people pleasing to the point where something needs to change. But I'm definitely not in that place anymore, where I have a really good work-life balance and it doesn't impact other parts of my life to be of service. In that I say of service, like it's still a business, not Mother Teresa. But as long as that's not to my detriment, then I think that that's okay. People pleasing can be a lovely thing to do when it's done from a place of love. But if it's to your own detriment, then that's something you might want to look at.
It's something I need to look at the moment, I think. What we spoke about in a car was really good. The not having to explain yourself piece. That's really important, I think. And I think we live in a society where everyone's explaining themselves naturally through social media. That's kind of what it's led us to do, right? We're explaining what we're doing every day, why we're doing it. So when you were saying earlier, if someone asks you, can I do this at this time? You're happy to just go, no, I can't.
Well, I didn't say I was happy to, but I'm trying to train myself to do that.
But just literally go like, oh no, I can't do that.
I can't do that. Or I won't do that.
Not like, because I'm the guy that will go, oh no, I can't do that. I've got this.
Yeah.
Or I've got that.
But you don't owe anyone an explanation. I think as a woman, I have to be more intentional with this. And that whole thing about being a woman, not being able to say no without having justification. Can I have your number? No, I have a boyfriend. Things like that. It's like, that's so indoctrinated to us as women as it is. And then obviously it's a societal thing of people pleasing and all of that stuff. But I think it's little things in your language of I don't reply to emails at weekends. Not I can't reply to emails at weekends. It's like, no, that's a choice. And it's whenever you use language like that, you're confirming to yourself and to the other person, like I respect my own time and I respect myself enough to not justify what I'm doing, just to make a decision for myself, and that's it. And all those little things are just confirmation to yourself. Because when you're over explaining yourself all the time, that's what you're telling yourself that you have to do. I have to explain myself because I don't deserve to take the weekends off. It's ludicrous, but it's not. I don't think it's an easy thing to do.
It's really interesting. It's something that I probably need to work on. I've never thought of it like you. You're right. If I'd have said to someone when I was 18, can I have your number? And they said no, I would expect I'd probably go, why not?
Yeah. Because we're here to please men, right? We don't want to upset anyone, especially as women. And also, like, if you look darker and deeper into this, if we upset a man, there's the potential that they're going to murder us, right? So that's like the extreme level of that. But we are told subliminally that we are here we don't want to upset men. We should always be trying to impress men, male gaze, all of the stuff. We don't want to upset them. And I had an experience actually in California, in Malibu. Some guy approached me on the beach and he was like, can I walk you along the beach? And I said, yeah, that's fine. And he was a bit creepy.
But you said yes anyway.
Well, he wasn't creepy at the time, right? So I thought, yeah, I'll chat to him. I'm very open when I travel as well. So I thought, yeah, sure. But then I got to the end of the beach and I thought, he's a little bit odd. And I'd pocket dialed my friend who had then called me back because he was still awake. And he said, is everything okay? And I said to this guy, I said, oh, sorry, I just need to text my friend back because he's called. He said, oh, yeah, your friend. And then said his name. He's like, oh, I said, how do you know that's his name? And he said, oh, I saw it on your phone. I was like, okay, that's like a giant red flag. And then I was trying to walk back to my car.
Wow.
And he said, I'll walk you back. I said, no, it's fine. I know where my car is. He said, oh, well, my car is just down there, whether it was or not, I don't know. He tried to hold my hand. He tried to kiss me when I got in my car. He said, I'll follow you back. And then I said, I'm working tonight. And he said, I'll come to the coffee shop and I'll just sit in the coffee shop.
First time you met this guy?
Yeah, never met before. So weird. And I was 32, 33. And I still didn't want to just say, no, I'm not interested, because I was too scared to say, no, I'm not interested. And so I let that continue. And then I had to stay at my friend's that night, because like one of my male friends, because I thought that he might have followed me home. I'd parked in the street along from my house. I did everything because I was so scared, and I was terrified. And I thought that is purely because as a woman, I didn't want to say no because I was scared of the outcome. And that for me was one of those moments where I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, you need to get better at vocalizing your boundaries and not explaining yourself.
It's terrifying, that.
Yeah.
And it's insane that you still have to kind of live like that in this day and age.
Yeah, and obviously things improve, but realistically, that reality is like, that's still the reality for every single woman.
How do we fix that?
I don't know.
How do you fix that? Because you're going to get a few weirdos in every walk of life, right? A few people that generally probably shouldn't be out in public, should be locked away because they're not stable. The neuroscience in their brain isn't wired correctly. I don't know what the science is behind it. Then you get some people that are odd because they don't know how to socialize. So they socialize a bit weirdly. How do we, I mean, as a, you know, you're obviously at the front of that, and you do a lot of vocal, you're very vocal on it. How do we try and fix that? Do we educate men and women to the education system from younger age?
Yeah, I think it's everything. I think it's a genderless thing. We do benefit from male allies for sure. I think it's starting at the bottom level. So if you think about like a hierarchy of male violence against women, at the top being murder, at the bottom catcalling, things like that, making women feel uncomfortable, like not taking no for an answer. All of those things have the ability to escalate. And whenever we have an experience with a man, we start at the bottom. Okay, a catcall in our head goes, it's a catcall, but it could be that he then follows me. It could be then something else happens. Like, that's what goes on in our head, even if we're not actively thinking about it all the time. So I think the answer a lot is the bottom stuff of calling out your mates when they're catcalling people. And I think catcalling has reduced. Maybe it's because I'm 36 and I dress like I wear sacks. But I think that's improved a little bit. Like little things like when white van men say like smile, all of these little things, calling each other out for that sort of stuff and listening when we say, I think this is problematic for me and this is why, rather than just saying, oh, it doesn't matter. It's a compliment, or it's just this little thing. Like, it's not, because all of these things compound to say, ultimately, we are worth more than you women because we can do what we want. It doesn't matter if it's the tiniest little thing. It still says, no, in order for you to feel safe, you need to just take that. And that's the scary thing. I would never in the past have said to a man who catcalled me, like, piss off or anything like that, because you don't know what they're going to turn around and do. And I know that sounds extreme, but it is the reality. And we're bombarded with stuff like this all the time about women in the news being like male's violence against women. So I think it starts there. You
get a lot of it in, as I said to you earlier, I was born in Turkey and we moved here. You get a lot of this kind of physical violence in those areas because there's this funny mindset, as you said, they're kind of stuck in the old ages a little bit. There's this pride element. There's this, so as opposed to doing what they generally feel for that person or the love they have for that person, they're more worried about their neighbor going, oh, your wife did this to you and you did nothing about it. So they're stuck in this kind of archaic mentality that doesn't really work. And you see a lot of, unfortunately, the extreme of what you talked about in those areas. I don't think you hear as much of it in Britain, but comparatively you don't.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure it happens pretty badly. I listened to one of your early podcasts and you spoke about love and how it used to be like selfless and how it's changed now, that narrative. And I've noticed that as well. Like you historically were taught about love, and love, you would do anything for the other person. You would die for them, you would kill for them. And I actually still use that as a bit of a, I'd do anything for you sort of thing. I love you. But the narrative's changed a bit right now. It's gone from selfless to selfish a little bit, concentrating on yourself. What do you think has made that shift? Because what's changed now to a decade ago or 100 years ago? Is it just that we're more aware as people?
I think it is the self-awareness that our generation have compared to, and no offense to people in the older generation, the self-awareness is infinitely different because of the access that we have. We can go on Instagram and be given 10 different pieces of information from 10 different therapists, self-diagnose ourselves with whatever that we want. But if we surround ourselves with that, we're constantly challenging the way that we think, whereas our parents didn't have any of that stuff. So I think a lot of it is to do with that. I also think there's been this big pushback against like hustle culture and against tradition and against all of the things that, again, we're kind of in that in-between generation where we're trying to push back, but we've still got all of the same values that our parents had too, and we're kind of a little bit lost in that. And that has its own like challenges, I think. So I think it's the pushback of that stuff too. But I do think, I don't know, like I'm not Gen Z, right? But I do think there's a little bit of Gen Z kind of almost going the other way. Some people, not all people, going too much other way of like, oh, you make me feel a certain way. I'm just going to cut you out of my life. Or you said something that I don't like. Okay, we're definitely not supposed to be together. I need to protect my own space. And I think sometimes I feel like there's maybe a push going too far the other way. But then I'm like, is that because I'm a little bit older? And it's like what our parents would say of like, oh, these kids these days, I don't know.
We spoke about this in the car, didn't we? Like, if you think of our parents, if they, generally speaking, that era, if they had an issue, they would try to work at it. But I feel like if we go right the other way, you're right. People are now like, oh, I'm done with him. He's this. I'm done with her. She's this, straight away.
It's also instant access, right? You go onto Instagram and you've got access to however many thousands of women and or men and or anyone else that you can just say, oh, I'm going to go on to the next best thing.
It's too easy.
Yeah. I think that's really sad.
It is sad, but also like, where are we taught? When do you know enough is enough? In anything, you said you were in an emotionally abusive relationship. Like, at what stage? If we just revert back to the white man van, I've kind of remembered my trail of thought. Should we be teaching? Should women learn more about the red flags of? So when someone calls you, you don't think anything of it, right? Or let's say you get with a guy, and they act a certain way, and you don't call them out on it. So you've now allowed that behavior. It then progresses to the next step. You don't call them out on it. It progresses to the next step, because none of these things go from catcalling you to murdering you overnight. There's a bit of generally speaking, there's a bit of a process there. But at what stage would you, or do you think, right, this is a red flag now, it's enough?
See, no.
Or does it not work like that?
I don't think it works like that, because it's men's violence.
I'm curious.
Yeah. It's men's violence against women. Women, we protect ourselves. We have been told, like, when Sarah Everard, that in 2020 it was, when all that happened, there were things about these are like rape alarms that women can bring out. Women, there was a thing that said, if you're scared of the police in London, flag down a bus. All of these things, I don't know if you remember Boris Johnson saying that, ludicrous. There was a point that myself and one of my friends actually got pulled over by the police in London because we were in a park after dark. And it was just a year after that, and I was terrified. And I thought, I clocked that they had a camera on their uniform, because I thought at least it's going to be filmed. And that's ludicrous.
It is.
The problem is not us not identifying male violence early enough. The problem is the male violence in the first place. And we do everything we can to protect ourselves. There's been times in my life where I would only wear baggy clothes because I couldn't be bothered with all of the stuff that would come from it. Like, we've done so much of that, and we're tired of doing that. And even little things like catcalling and stuff is like a stress response on us. And the impact of stress on our health is huge. There's so many little things there that, like, we've kind of had enough of saying, I'm going to change the way that I feel. One of my good friends, and she won't mind me saying this, she's a sex worker. And somebody released unsolicited pictures of her naked, and they went completely viral. And they knew who it was. She had evidence. She went to court. And she lost because they said, well, you put pictures like that out online, so it's no different. And she lost.
Wow.
And I don't want to say that that's that's a precedent, because I'm sure that that's not the case for everyone. And I know that there's been pushback, and that's just one specific case. And I'm sure there was other parts of that I don't know about. It's not really an us problem, unfortunately, for you guys.
I remember when all this was going on, and there was the argument. What was the argument? Not all men, or was it not all men, or something like that? Is that the hashtag?
Classic. And it's not all men. We know it's not all men, but it's some men, and it's predominantly men's violence against women. And it's it's so ingrained, and it's the little things. I see it more now too with a lot of white men with podcasts who exacerbate this narrative of they talk about dating and they talk about successful women being less than, and there's a certain kind of culture that's being created by these types of podcasts that is exacerbating it at a grassroots level as well. I commented on something the other day, and it was a man saying that oral contraceptives cause cancer, which they don't. And I'd commented on it, and it had hundreds of thousands of views. And I commented and said, this isn't right. What evidence do you have for it? What's your mechanistic reasoning? Like, I was deliberately quite articulate in what I said. Someone replied to me saying, what's your body count? And that's so, it's trivial, right? I don't care about stuff like that, but that's realistically an outcome of this environment that we're still creating in some way, shape or form. And it's like, what should I do in that situation? Should I not have my body or my face on social media so that they don't know that I'm a woman? So then they can't come back at me with that? Like, it's...
And it's like, we need to, with certain things, we were speaking about this with a couple of friends the other day, we need to get beyond the banter because you kind of are saying stuff and you're labeling it as this thing, but there's obviously, that's their way they're being able to express themselves.
Yeah. And women don't want to look like they're not fun or that they're too serious. I say women, I'm generalizing here.
Yeah.
We don't want to look too dramatic or too emotional. So what happens is when people have that banter, if a woman says it, oh, she's just been melodramatic, she's just been emotional. But if a man stands up and says, oh, do you know what, like that is funny, but realistically, this is why this is problematic, it's completely different how it's taken.
The kind of wolf whistling out of a panel van, all that kind of stuff, that requires like huge behavioral changes, right? And programming, because when you're growing up, me and you are in the same sort of generation, so we're stuck in between both. And I think maybe in 100 years it will change a bit because we'll all die off, as in, the olders and us. But like every film you watch, everything you sort of, all the lads banter around the table, it all unfortunately stems still towards that. Mm-hmm. So for it to change, I don't know what it's going to require, but it's a bigger job than meets the eye, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you have a few that are consciously like, as I said to you in the car, if there's something I don't know about, I like to ask about it. I'm the why guy. I always still ask why. And it sometimes gets me in trouble but how else am I going to learn? I'm asking you stuff on this podcast. It will go out on TikTok and I might get hammered by a load of women for asking certain things, but like, I want to learn. And the only way I'm going to learn is by asking.
I don't think you would. I think, because that's the point. Like, I think there's certain areas of my life where I'm like, I don't understand that particularly. I don't understand fully around gender and sex and certain race things that I've got white privilege. There's certain things that I don't know about, cis privilege, that I want to ask questions about too. And I agree. I think the problem is when people don't ask. Something I thought was interesting, and I'd love to hear your take on this, was I saw this the other day about the lost generation stuff.
Okay.
And they were talking about relationships of our generation. And one of the struggles that we have as this kind of in-between generation is that our parents, some of our mums or female role models would work, but it was still kind of, maybe they didn't have huge careers. Maybe they're still kind of in between. And what's happened is the men of our generation grew up predominantly with normal, traditional gender roles, predominantly, right? Yep. But what's happened is they've now fallen in love with or are coming up against women who are not necessarily about that all the time. So they're much more career driven and things like that. But for a lot of these men, their first female love or caregiver set the expectation, right? So you have these expectations of, and I know we sort of touched on this actually at IFS, you have these sort of expectations of women, but also you have the new age and the understanding that it's okay for women to want a career. So what happens is we as women are trying to do it all because we know that you still have these expectations and these wants of that more traditional role, but you're also supporting us to do our career. And then we're kind of, it's a really difficult thing to navigate for everybody involved.
It is, and I think there's a lot of pressure on you guys on that sense. Like, I think about it, and I've said this to you before, I grew up with quite a traditional family, what's societally traditional. My mum was my mum, my dad was my dad. The dad went out and got the food, and the mum looked after the home, brought the kids up, or me, I was the only child. So I've got that kind of growing up. But I was very, very fortunate to see unconditional love from mum and dad. They're still together. They're still married. They still hold hands and skip, which is fucking rare. Rare, if you know what I mean. They've been together forever. So I've got this like intense desire to have that kind of love and that kind of family unit. But I'm also growing up, I'm on the cusp of an era where, you know, women are having incredible careers and maybe not having children, maybe not getting married, you know, doing all these other things. And I kind of respect that too, but I'm lost because I'm married. I've been married nearly 2 years. I've been with my partner 11 years. And one of the things that I fell in love with her about was her actual, I said to you, her intelligence, her like drive, the fact that she was hardworking, like she wasn't a trophy person on my arm, all these things. But I'm 34 years old and I want a family at some point. So at what point and how is it fair for me to say, right, you got to stop your career now or stop working because we need a family?
Yeah.
She's making that sacrifice, not me.
Mm-hmm. It's really, really tough. I think it's really tough for men, for anyone to navigate. And I feel the same on the other side. So I'm someone who's a big business person, but I want to be a stay-at-home mum. And I'm like, at what point do I say, right,
I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what that will look like will be dependent on my situation and who knows what, but I want to have babies and predominantly after being around family and things with their own situations and my own values, I know what that will probably look like. And so for me, it's the same sort of thing. At what point do I say, okay, I'm going to give up this hustle that society, Destiny's Child told me to like keep working and be independent. And there's a shame associated with somebody who is a woman who is trying to do all these things. There's a bit of a shame sometimes of like, maybe I'm not going to keep pushing for that anymore. Maybe I'm going to say this is enough for me and I'm going to step back a little bit and start a family and do all these things. And it's definitely, as I've gotten older, something that I've been thinking about of, you know, like, how do you navigate that? And it's about having your own markers of success of like, okay, well, my marker of success is being able to have a family and have a business. And so that doesn't look like taking over the world with my business. And that's okay. You have to make these sacrifices, but then you have to be comfortable with that and knowing your markers of success. But it's different as a man, a husband.
It's also incredibly noble to be a mum. Like, it's hard work to hold a family down, to hold a house down, to keep it functioning, keep the kids. Like, I think we underestimate how hard that is.
For sure.
When I speak to some of my friends that are no longer in a relationship and they're sharing the kids, you know, one weekend with them, they're like, fucking hell, mate.
Yeah.
I can't believe she does this 24/7. Like, I have them for 2 days and I want to give them back. You know, and they're their own kids.
Yep. And this is the thing. Again, traditionally, we've sort of said it's better to be a breadwinner. You're working harder as a breadwinner, or you're doing better if you have a career. And it's like, absolutely not. Being a mum and that being your sole purpose, or that being you being a stay-at-home mum and not doing those other things, like that's equally, potentially, if not more important, and potentially, probably, definitely harder from what I've heard.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think there's a right or wrong though.
No.
So in my opinion, I think if you've got a group of friends, 5 of you, 5 girls, and 2 of them in the group, their whole life ambition is to become a mum, and 2 of them is to be a career, and the other 2 something. I don't think either one should say, oh, you shouldn't do that, you should be doing this. I think each their own. And as a guy, if I want a bit more of a traditional marriage, yeah, the first 5 people I meet might not work, but the 6th might. Because there's so many people in the world. It will eventually, you'll find that person that you kind of work with. So I just think you got to stay true to where you're at.
I think the shame part is hard, especially for women, in the sense of, again, there's this narrative with certain male podcast hosts at the moment, obviously not you, where
I know the ones you mean. I've heard some of them.
Career women are kind of being blamed for this research, which is not accurate, that the population is declining, and it's because women are so selfish to want a career and
something
it's
about
unattractive to be successful. There's like this dating rule. Have you heard the dating rule? And it's like you have to
less likely to find love. There's all this kind of
all of this stuff. We're told it's unattractive, and to be fair, I'm regularly told that what I do and etc. is unappealing to men in a heteronormative situation. So we know this already. We don't need it. Like, we need to change that narrative of like, I know that there are men who don't find it unattractive. I know that that's the case, but we're constantly being told like we are still the problem, because how dare we think we can turn 40 and then meet a man and then get a baby? Like, that's not going to happen. Men love young women because young women are fertile, and it's hideous and it's so insidious. And for some reason, I feel like that narrative is getting louder, and I don't know if it's like this pushback. I don't know.
Could just be your algorithm.
Yeah, why? Which says a lot about me, doesn't it? I know,
it does say a lot.
I know.
I listened to when I was doing a bit of research last night, I listened to your first podcast that you did, Single Mother by Choice, as in the first episode. And you mentioned in that about you not having a traditional mum and dad gender roles growing up. If I recall rightly, your mum worked, your dad was stay at home. Yeah,
so my dad did work. But my mum had her own company, and my dad he was the best dad. He predominantly stayed at home, but not completely. He did our house up from like nothing to like this incredible house. He's very talented, but in terms of wage income and things, usually my mum would traditionally bring in the money, and my dad did more of the other stuff.
Does that have a role in your mindset?
Oh, for sure. Because
we're subliminally programmed as kids, aren't we?
For sure. But in good ways and bad ways, in the sense of my mum being an entrepreneur and a business owner and doing it all made me think I can do it all as well.
That's very positive, especially in that era.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to my choice in men, I have lots of bad choices in men, but it's not because of my dad per se as much as it's more to do with the dynamic and my attachment style and things that came as a result of that. I became very much an avoidant, or I had avoidant tendencies. I don't like to identify too much with it. And that was not because of specific people. That's just, we all pick things up as a kid. Which is kind of what we're talking about at the beginning. And for me, that manifested as me being a bit of an avoidant, but my bad choice in men is probably more to do with that fixer mentality of I would always date men that were needed. I felt I could fix them in some way. Yeah.
But you also said in that podcast that you've not given up on men.
No, I love men. And this is the thing. So we were laughing about this because you were like, I don't know your sexual orientation. It's not really what you said, but along those lines. Because I'm a raging feminist and I love women and I love all genders, but there's something for me, the way that I always explain to people is I think that men have the capacity to be incredible. Every man in my life, I've got two brothers especially who are just the best men in the world, but I think men have the capacity to just be incredible, as do women, as do all other genders. And I love the kind of, some of my core values I feel come from quote unquote masculine energy, which I hate that phrase. I'm trying to think of a better way to word it. Come from relationships I've had with men, feelings of safety, feelings of like, I am very much dominant in my career and dominant in that side of my life. So when it comes to relationships, I don't want to be dominant. I just want to be chill and peaceful and have people look after me. And I think that's okay. And women can do that for sure. But I am inherently, I love men.
So your ideal guy is actually pretty traditional.
Yeah, probably.
By the sounds of it.
Yeah, probably. And it didn't used to be. And that's probably only changed in the last few years, where I kind of went through one really awful breakup in 2020 and it was just a complete shit show. And at that point I was like, this is a you problem. Like I kind of kept thinking, I didn't say I've never said men are trash ever, but I definitely had bad experiences with men. And in 2020, I had a lot of time to obviously think. And
didn't we all?
Yeah. And I really took it on board as this is all, it's not my fault that the situations that I've ended up in, but I've actively sought out people that treat me in a certain way to confirm a certain narrative that I have about I'll pick men that I needed fixing, and it's not for me to fix anyone. I don't want that, and it's changed. And same with my role as a potential parent. That's only changed in the last few years too. Of thinking of being around, especially my sister-in-law who does a lot of attachment parenting, and she's an incredible mother. And I think that's what I want that to look like. But that's only changed in the last few years for me, and I don't know why it's changed. It's just getting older, or not feeling ashamed of saying I like traditional roles. And there's also the thing of like...
You've almost done a full circle.
Yeah, but there's also the thing of like a little bit of feeling of how dare you say that you want a career and to be a stay-at-home mum and to have a traditional marriage and also live your best single life for 15, 20, 35 years.
A bit, isn't it?
How dare you have it all? Yeah, you can't have it all. And so there's that thing of like, when you say that you want it, you're putting it out there to say like, I want this. And is that really selfish? I don't know. Or is that me asking too much? I don't know. But it's the reality, I think.
It's quite a deep piece because time doesn't really wait.
I know, especially as a woman.
Well, it doesn't really wait. It doesn't wait for anybody.
Sometimes.
It doesn't wait for anybody. So I'm worried that our younger generation have sort of got these so many different routes they can go down. Traditionally, in the old days, you had a few routes each that you took in your gender roles. Now there's almost the world's your oyster, as the saying is. But you still want to have some focus in life, no? And I think that's okay to change. So you've done a full circle, which is cool, because when you're younger, you probably wanted something and you've kind of come back round now and you're like, right, I'm ready to settle. But at what stage do you think, do you think there's a correct time, correct age, correct something to be like, right, I need to buckle down and do X. I need to buckle down and do Y. Because we could spend our life floating in the abyss and before you know it, you're 70 years old. You've not done anything you wanted to do because you've been indecisive.
Yeah, I don't think there's a certain time. I mean, if you read the textbooks and you're a woman, that time is 35 and you have to sort your shit out. But I don't think so. I think everything happens the time that it's supposed to happen. I think I'm a really big believer of even quote unquote failed relationships. I think they were supposed to happen. They didn't fail. They taught you something. I'm very much of that mindset. So if it takes you 40 years to figure out this is what I'm really passionate about or this is what I want to do, I think as long as you enjoy those 40 years or you learn and you grow, then great. And obviously science is important. Obviously, if we're talking babies, that you do have to think about time. Like that's not, like, let's not be naive. But aside from that, I don't think so. I think what's amazing now is that you can do anything. And yeah, I think as long as you're constantly thinking about how am I helping myself or how am I helping other people, then not constantly, but a lot of the time.
That podcast I listened to, Single Mother by Choice, I only listened to the first episode last night to get the feel. So that was in 2022, last year. Mm-hmm. And you were embarking on a journey of potentially being a single mother by choice, by definition. Mm-hmm. What's the latest on that? How's that going?
I'm taking a pause. So basically what happened there was...
where did that all come from?
So I'd always thought about it. Do you know who Catherine Ryan is? Comedian.
I feel I do, yeah.
So Catherine Ryan is one of my heroes, and she talked about how she'd bought sperm and she had it in the freezer, and she was like, she already had a kid, she said, if I want another kid, like I know that that's there. And she's a couple of years older than me. And as I was I knew that I wanted kids. I'd had a pregnancy before, and that had made me really realize that was something that I wanted. And I think that then in Christmas 2020, we had a really horrible, something happened in our family that kind of shook our family, and it's an ongoing thing now. And it made me kind of go, oh, well, if I want something, I need to do it now. It gave me a stark kick up the arse of like, what's actually really important here. And one of those things for me is having a baby. And I was acting out of a place of grief, and it was a big thing. So I spent 6 months in grief basically of last year. Mm-hmm. And it came from that. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. I'd thought about this for years of maybe I'll do this myself. And I'd always said to myself when I'm 35, if I'm not in a relationship, I'll do this myself. I'd always said it. So it wasn't a knee-jerk thing, but at that time it was like a kick up the arse. And so I went through a full process of IUI, which is basically artificial insemination. You get sperm from like an Argos catalogue of sperm. It's just amazing. Can
I just hold you there for a minute?
Yeah.
Argos catalogue of sperm.
It's great.
Do you get to see what the guy was like?
So you basically
or does it tell you like ethnic or what?
It tells you everything. So you can select what you want in terms of ethnicity, height, all of these things, right?
What?
Yeah.
Is that not fucking about with nature?
No. Every clinic is different, and they advise you to pick someone that's similar to you so that your child genetically looks like you, basically. And also in terms of illness and things like that.
Yeah, there's the blood
genetically,
stuff, isn't
it? But every clinic is different. So the clinic that I use, they show baby photos. So you see pictures of them as a baby. They have fake names, but they have like personality profiles. They do certain tests on like emotional intelligence or maybe personality tests. They also have a section, which is great, that someone at the clinic will say, so my sperm man he's not called Gulliver, but his fake name was Gulliver, which we loved. And so it's like
Gulliver.
Yeah. Gulliver is so friendly and pleasant. And when he comes into the clinic, he always says hi and it's all this stuff. Those are my favourite bits because it's like, you can just imagine like Sandra sitting in the office like, oh, I loved him. And so you kind of, you can see what you like and then you make a decision based on that. So I did that. He's still sitting on ice and somewhere. And I went through one round of artificial insemination, hormones, everything, and it didn't work, which was quite surprising to me. Although the statistics is only like 30% chance of it working, I kind of thought it might work. Didn't work, and I thought I was really devastated because I was still in that grief. And so I decided to go through the journey, an IVF journey myself. Ordered some more sperm, Gulliver's still there, and went through the process of getting all my fertility checks and stuff, and that was all fine. And then because I was so stressed, it's a really stressful process, IVF, because I was so stressed, my menstrual cycle was late. I had many conferences and things, and I had to make a decision, and I said, I'm just going to hold off. I'm too stressed. I'd stopped drinking alcohol. I'd stopped drinking coffee. I'd been really regimented with my food. I'd gained a bit of weight because I was trying to make sure I was eating everything that I needed. And because I'm a nutritionist, I was quite anal about it all. And it just caused me too much stress. And so I couldn't have even gone through it anyway. So then I just took a step back. And that was probably summer last year. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of cracked on with work and took some time out, took a holiday. And then I just kind of thought, he's there if I want him. But I kind of stepped out of that grief. And I've had a thought, my fear was always, well, what if I can't have kids? What if I leave it too long and I can't? And then I've gone through the worst case scenario of if I can't, I would love to go through adoption or find another way to do it. And as soon as I made peace with that, I thought, okay, well, I can wait, because actually the worst case for me right now is still an incredible case, really. Hopefully that would work out. Mm-hmm. So right now it's all on pause. I've still got the sperm in, not my freezer, obviously. And that might be something I pursue. It might not be. Because
there is still lots of other routes, right? Even if you can't yourself. There's lots of other routes that I've sort of heard of.
For sure.
Online. What I can't get my head around is, we've got friends, I said to you in the car, that are trying now for babies, right? And fucking hell, like the window of opportunity is small. I don't know, me and my partner haven't started trying it, but it's like a certain time, certain date, you've got to be eating certain thing, laying a certain way, all these ridiculous things. Yet you can go out on a one night stand, be out of your head, have sex with someone and they're pregnant.
Yep.
How does that work?
Science. Like it's wild. And it's wild. I think it is luck. I think sometimes the eggs are not viable. Sometimes they're anovulatory cycles, so you have a cycle but you don't actually ovulate. Sometimes the sperm just gets a little bit misguided and doesn't go that way. There's so many reasons why.
Can't swim properly.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole other thing, right? Because we think about fertility as a woman's problem, but actually it's no one's problem. It just happens in men and women. Sometimes there's issues. So I think it is just luck amongst all of the other stuff that potentially, obviously, could go wrong.
I mean, it's an incredible process if you think about the actual what's going on there.
Yeah.
And the chances of it happening is very small, right? I can't remember what the stats were. It was
it's
1 million to 1.
It's low. So you basically, when you ovulate, so you can have sex up to 5 days before you ovulate, and the sperm can live there for 5 days. And then you ovulate.
That sounds minging, but yeah.
Let's not visualize that. And then the egg, once you ovulate, you've got 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
So you've got that kind of 5 to 7 day window. It's probably slightly less than that. And obviously the chances are highest just as you ovulate.
And why, a bit more personal, but
go for it.
Go for it.
I'm all for it.
Why are you choosing the route of doing this and not the more traditional route of finding someone? Is that just because the age, or is it because you've not found anyone, or is it? It's
because I've not been in a relationship where I want to go down that road with somebody yet.
Okay. So you're not against that?
No. And this is the thing too, is when I decided.
This isn't like be a one parent without another.
No, I would love to do it. Like, again, coming back to what we were just saying, I would love to meet a person, maybe get married, have a kid, go through that whole journey. Yeah. But for me, that hasn't happened, and I'm 36, and our fertility does start to drop off slightly. It's not a big cliff at 35, but it does start to drop off. So that's kind of the main reason. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wouldn't want to have had kids with any of the people that I've been with in the past, but not any of them, 90% of those. And I think...
Hopefully none of them are listening, but yeah.
Well, maybe some of them are. They can do some self-reflection. No, I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. Like, realistically, they probably wouldn't want to have kids with me either, right? It's a mutual thing. But no, for like, and that's the thing. So when I decided I was going to do it, I thought I'm going to have to grieve the idea of a traditional family. And that was quite hard for me to sit with because I thought that's always what I wanted. I denied it a little bit, but as you said, I've kind of come back to that. And I thought that's sad for me to feel like I'm not having that. And it's not because it's the way that I think it should be. It's the way that I've wanted it to be, which might still happen. I don't know. Everything's on pause. So
I guess it's all your choice, right? So you're kind of happy with it.
Yeah.
You're making a choice. Do you think there's an unfair stigma on single mums?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But
in what sense do you think?
Well, so again, there's certain podcasts, and I know because they've been sent to me, of where people, usually men, will say single mothers, and I don't know the statistics on this, so I don't want to crucify it, but there's things like the research around kids' academic performance if they've got one parent versus two, and usually that one parent usually is a single mum. That they've got lower academic performance, for example, or they've got poorer health outcomes, for example. And I don't know the research enough to say, have they controlled for socioeconomic status and all of these other things. I don't know the research enough.
And if it was a single dad, would it be the same?
Yeah, exactly.
It just happens to be that most kids are traditionally left with the mum.
Exactly. And someone sent this to me actually when I was going through my own journey, and they said, because the man who has the podcast had said, like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that journey because the impact that it might have on a future child, which I don't know the research enough to debate it. So I think there's that kind of stigma of like, okay, well, this is what the science says. But realistically, I also think the stigma comes from our older generations of families should look like a mum, a dad, and this many kids. And I always actually found that quite gross when I was growing up. Like, we had family friends who were in, like, I used to call them like the 2.4 children. Like, it was really like mum and dad. And I used to say, oh, that's so boring. I never want that boring life. But I obviously don't think that now. But I think it's that. I just think it's societal standards, right? And then they are shifting for sure.
They're shifting, but also I always think about what my dad said to me when I used to take a load of protein shakes. He'd be like, there's not enough research, son. There's not enough research. It's too new. And I used to say, it's healthy, Dad. Those generational people were telling us that, you know, a kid needs X and Y to equal that. But you could argue the other side that there also isn't enough data yet for what we're all experiencing right now. So if we carry on in the trajectory that we are, what is it going to look like in 30 years, 50 years, 75 years, 100 years? You know, how are kids going to perform in school? How are they going to grow up? What are they going to grow up thinking?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think it's a really interesting time because I don't think anyone really knows. People are throwing out stats.
Yeah.
I never know where this fucking research comes from anyway. You know, when people say research shows, research, from my understanding of research, you ask 100 people something or you test 100 people and that's your research.
I mean, but
the fuck is that accurate?
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, there's obviously, like, if I went down like the PhD route of like scientific rigor.
You've studied all this. You're a doctor. Come on, doctor.
Yeah, but like, so there's different qualities of research. So like the top quality of research, basically, this is what we call like a meta-analysis or a systematic review. And what that is it's a piece of research that takes all of these other bits of research that have been done in one area. So for example, single mothers and childhood academic performance.
Yeah.
It takes all of the studies that have taken 100 single mothers with kids and looked at their academic performance. Maybe the 100 people have done 100 studies have been done on those people, different people. And so what this will do is take all of those bits of research together, and then it'll run statistics on them, and they'll say, overall, the body of research says this. That's like the gold standard. The problem is now everyone just says research says this, because if you go onto Google and you type in research for X and Y, you will find it. Because realistically, research has to be like peer reviewed and published. But realistically, the quality of research is so low in so many situations, and a lot of it just gets through the net and then it's published. And if like there'll be bits of research that say keto diet is optimal for health. It's absolutely not. But I guarantee you, if you Googled that, you would find a research paper that said that. But if you look at all of the research around keto and health outcomes in one of those reviews, it wouldn't say that. But most people don't necessarily look at that, because why would you look at that? You don't care about science stuff particularly, so why would you know that?
Yeah, you wouldn't. You just listen to a podcast and take it as gospel.
Exactly that.
Which is cliche. But I mean, do you have any friends around you that are from a single mum background, upbringing? The only reason I'm asking is I have friends around me that are, and I have friends and I have people that I've spoken to that are. Like I had Lockie from Rudimental on here a few weeks ago, who is 36 and he's still got a massive chip on his shoulder because his dad wasn't around. Now, I've not come across someone that's had one parent, doesn't have to be a mum, but that's had one parent that hasn't been longing or upset or affected by not having the second parent. Is that, hold it, you ready to go? Is that the fact that they genuinely feel they've missed out, or is that society telling them they should have had two parents and they've only had one and they feel hard done by? Do you see what I'm trying to get at there?
Yeah, I would say that's one for the therapist because I don't know. But what I would say is, have you ever met an adult that doesn't have a struggle with something that they've taken on from their parents?
No. They're not aware of it most of the time.
Yeah,
but no.
Exactly. If you're aware of it, then you're already winning. And I think that's the thing. We all have stuff. And I think with the single parent stuff, it's like, I don't know. We're not parents, right? So we don't know all of that stuff. But from what I know, kids want consistency and they want unconditional love. And where that comes from
doesn't really matter.
I wouldn't think it matters. And you think about relationships that are not like a man and, let's say you've got, again, a man and a woman, a heterosexual relationship, and they've got kids, and it's a tumultuous relationship, and they're always in and out of each other's lives and things. Mm-hmm. That's not consistent, and it's not that they're to blame for that because it's life, right? Everyone has their own situations, but it's interesting that the stigma is always on like the single parent. And what's very interesting is if you saw a single dad playing in the park with his kid or doing the laundry with his kid, what would you think? Versus if you saw a woman doing the same thing.
You and I might get shot for saying this, but generally speaking, I feel if you saw a mum on their own or found out there was a single mum, you feel a certain way. But if you saw, I don't know, if I saw a dad with a kid that was on their own, for some reason I feel like I want to
be like, admirable, what a legend, babysitting, yes, like what a legend, he's juggling.
Hug them as well, like almost feel a bit like empathetic or compassionate to them. Yeah. But if I see a single mum, society has trained me to think a certain way about them. Yeah. I'm not necessarily going to say what that is on here, but you think a certain way. You always think the worst for some reason. Yeah. In that element, but not in the other element.
When you see a man, you think, oh, his wife must have died and he's like this hero that's taking care of all of this stuff. And and you don't have the same narrative when it comes to a woman. And that's societal conditioning, for sure it is.
By your own words, raging feminist.
I was like, oh God, what did I say?
No, this isn't bad. What does it mean? What does feminist mean to you? Because I feel like these words, the fundamentals of what they're trying to achieve, feminism, veganism, all these other shit.
All right.
Let me rephrase that. All these other terms, the fundamental is correct, but you get a little subsector of them that take it to an extreme, and then it builds resent for the whole term.
The thing with feminism is, to me, it means equality. Like that's what it means in a nutshell. The thing is that we've got a lot of people, a lot of women or people who identify as women who are really angry about everything that's happened until this point, and men's violence against women is one example. So is it a surprise that people take it to the extremes and shout the loudest and feel that way? No, and I also understand and I'm empathetic towards it. My stance with it is I want to be able to have conversations with people like you and with anyone that's like, oh, what is feminism and how can I support it? And to me, being really aggressive in my language about it and being quite, aggressive in my language, that doesn't open up dialogue. That doesn't let us sit down and have a conversation and say, this is how we can work together to change things. It says, no, sit down, shut up and listen to me now. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's helpful. As much as I understand why that is the case, and there are people who do feminism a lot better than I do, and I get it wrong a lot I probably say things that I'm not supposed to say. I don't really know what I'm doing either. I'm just saying from my perspective, like what I think feminism is. And it's about equality. It's about safety. It's about all living collectively as equals, not about, that's all.
And I guess if you're suppressed as any, a minority in society, eventually that comes out in one way or another, whether that's women, men, black, white, gay, straight. If we look at history, if we look at, it always will build up, and the cup will eventually overflow. And then you have an extreme action to something that people go, "Cool, that was a bit over the top." Yeah. But it's tens, hundreds of years of build up that's come to that point.
Absolutely. We're being so tentative on this topic because we're like, I'm not sure.
Well, I honestly don't know how to talk about some of it because I'm a guy. So I always feel like I'm talking from a different position. I'm not only a guy, I'm a guy that's had a very traditional upbringing, very traditional gender roles, kind of living in that old but new stuck. I'm torn. I'm in the middle of it all, to be honest.
I think the thing is,
I don't know whether I'm coming or going.
Same. I think what we were talking about in the car is the idea of just not being defensive about it and being open to talk about it. And the problem is when people are really, really outspoken, which we need these people because we need the conversation to move forward. So we need these people. But the problem sometimes with that is people then get very defensive. Let's take, she's called Monroe Bergdorf, I think. She is a model. She is a trans woman, and she got bullied basically by Piers Morgan on live TV, and it was horrific. I remember this. Yeah. And that's a prime example of someone who she's doing everything she can to fight for rights of everyone, and of a man, a white man, getting defensive because he doesn't really understand it, and going so defensive that it's aggressive and nasty. And that is a huge
personal, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, that's not her problem. That's a him problem. And I think that's the conversation of like, why is it that we all get so defensive? We saw this with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I definitely found all of that challenge in trying to navigate for myself as a white woman of like, do I notice any defensiveness coming up? And why do I notice any defensiveness coming up? I'm here just to listen. And I thought this is interesting because this might be how men might feel in the feminism argument, maybe on a smaller scale, I don't know. And I think it can be really hard to navigate on both sides, but just being able to be like, can you let me be wrong? Can you let me say something and not cancel me and just say, that was a silly thing to say. What we actually say is this.
I was literally I've written down as you're talking cancel culture for that exact reason, because, there's mediums to say certain things, but ultimately podcasts are done about sharing stories, right? We share stories, we talk about stuff, people listen, they might take some value away from it. If not, they manage to spend an hour of their time listening to two people chatting shit, basically. But I want to be able to ask things without having that, so the moment I say something incorrect, I'd rather you go, but it's actually the term is this, rather than be taken off and cancelled and no one listen to you anymore. Not that I'm at that position yet, because that's a privilege in itself. But I think that puts people off and why everyone's on eggshells. I know that would be why I would be in a public forum like this to say certain things.
It's the same. I'm the same. And then there's also the fear of being wrong. Like we have to get more comfortable with being wrong. And I think that's the thing. Like you don't have the fear of being wrong because we all do it, right? And that helps.
What about, you said something earlier, and this is controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. All other genders. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by all other genders?
I mean, whatever gender anyone identifies as. So obviously I am aware of biological sex, but in terms of genders, that's something that I'm definitely still learning. I often revert back to he and she. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just very mindful of including anyone, whatever gender they identify as. So
I don't know a lot about it, to be honest. I've probably ignorantly, if I'm being honest, kept myself away from it a bit. Just kind of let it do its thing. But I guess we kind of touched on it earlier in the car, like where do we draw the line in society? As in, how far does that line that we've always been taught and learned, I'm not saying it's correct, but it's always been a certain way, it's kind of being bent a little bit to one side at the moment and going like this, but how far does it need to come this way? And do you think it will eventually re-find its own? I think about not just the gender argument, I think about a lot of things we see in life. At first, something new comes out, everyone's against it, right? and 50 years later, it's now the norm. Any new idea, I see it as like a Bitcoin or a stocks and shares thing. So it shoots up, it goes down, it shoots up, it goes down, then it levels. But do you think there's a fear that we're going too far one way with our, me and you don't have children, but we want to have children. You want to bring children to this world. What kind of world do you want to bring them into? Do you want to bring them into a world that they can identify as a pineapple when they grow up? As in, not I'm just being devil's advocate here to get some conversation going. Or would you rather them have some structure and system to their life? Because I feel we're going too far. Sometimes some of the arguments are too far.
I don't feel like it's my argument to have. And
Wow,
that's maybe an easy way out. But I kind of think if someone, and we said this in the car, if someone says to me, my pronouns are they, them, great, they, them, and I will do my best to get it right. And if I don't, I'll apologize and I'll get it right next time.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of it. With children, if I bring children into this world, I want them to come into a world that is based on love and compassion. And those things are trivial in the sense of if we can, to me, if we were all gender neutral in however many years, maybe there would be more loving compassion in the world because there would be less men's violence against women, for example. Like, I don't know what that looks like societally. So I don't know.
Yeah,
for me, it's about what can I do to bring kindness around me and to make other people feel safe. And if what makes other people feel safe is using the right pronouns and allowing them to express themselves however they want, then that's a priority. It doesn't, the other stuff feels really like silly, like, and it's not a silly concept, it's an important concept, but to me it's like, well, how can I change my actions as opposed to have an opinion on what someone else wants to do with themselves or their body?
I hear you.
What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think I know enough about it. And as I said, I think the part of it is that I'm probably fixed in a certain mindset without realizing I am. So when I hear certain things, I might think, that doesn't make sense. I've always kind of been quite logical. So if I said to you, I'm going to drop this pen and it's going to hit the ceiling, I just physically couldn't have that. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't let my brain accept that because I don't know whether there's gravity or not, but it's going to fall because that's what happens every time. So I just try and look on logic. And as we said earlier in the car, if people need a certain way of thinking to be a better human in society, then I respect that and I'm all for that. So if someone needs to be religious and have faith to be better, that's great. If someone needs to identify a certain way, that's great. And as you said, and I'm the same, if someone says to me, please call me by this, I would. I might accidentally get it wrong in 4 words time because I revert to what I know, but I wouldn't be like, no, I'm not saying that, because who am I to? It's no different to when I meet you, you could say my name's John.
Yeah.
Well, I might go, your parents are a bit weird calling you John, but as in, it's your name.
I think some of it is like, what does it matter if we don't understand as much as, so there's some things that I want to understand more, and you're obviously the same sort of type of person where you want to understand. But if you don't, we're scared of the stuff we don't understand. And if you're not making an effort to understand things, then you have to just find acceptance for acceptance that you don't understand that stuff, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's not what you think, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just that you don't understand it. So maybe instead of trying to change all of that stuff, you work on your ability to accept things that you don't understand.
I mean, it makes life more peaceful. It's quite stoic as well, in terms of like, it kind of is what it is.
Yeah. Well, that's
Let
kind
it
of,
be.
I think that we'd all be more peaceful if we lived our life like that. Like kind of it's radical acceptance. It's accept what we can change and what we can do better, and let go of the things that we can't. And that's how I try and.
I read a quote the other day that really resonated. It said something like, you don't want to be a harmless person, you want to be a peaceful person. Might be from someone that you might not agree with, actually. Oh. I think it's from Jordan Peterson. Doesn't know.
Yeah. Moving on.
Right, we'll carry on. Nutrition. Can you define holistic nutrition?
Do you know what? I read something recently that holistic nutrition is crap, but it's got a bit of a bad rep. Bad rep. The way that I define it is taking like a multifaceted approach to nutrition. So it's less eat this, don't eat this, and more how does all of this food impact the rest of your life, and how does the rest of your life impact this food? So it's take a holistic approach, I guess.
I'm with you. And body types go in trends, right? So in my era, probably same as yours, it was Paris Hilton kind of era, and there was like size 0 models. I even remember hearing that term. I don't even know what size that is in real life. Is that actual size 0?
Size 0 in the States is size 4 in the UK.
Okay, fine.
I think the average UK women's size now, I think, is maybe 12 to 14. I'm not 100%.
Yeah. But then you obviously do a full loop, and you've got, then the Kim K look came about. Then everyone was trying to go that way. Now she's going back to trying to look slimmer. I don't even know if that's the right term, but not as curvy. You're quite open, right? So I've seen you post recently about it was quite a funny post actually. You put photos of you in different stages in your like physique and then wrote what you look like to other people and what you really were feeling. The period when you were doing bodybuilding bikini competition, I mean, you were posting stuff. Do you think that was having a negative effect on people watching that on social media? With their own like body dysmorphia? Possibly.
And that's something that I'm still aware of now, and I've had backlash on it.
Have you?
A lot of.
What, recently?
Yeah.
I think all your stuff's pretty
I get it all the time.
positive. And
the issue is when, like, we know that when people are exposed to like what we call like the thin ideal, so the thinner body, we know that it can negatively impact their body image, how they feel about their bodies. And that's true. Like, we know social media use is associated with like lower body image, for example, or less positive body image. So that does happen. And so for me, for sure, when I was competing, I would have been detrimental to that because I was always posting lean pictures. And as much as I would post off-season pictures, my off-season picture would be like, I'm embracing the fluff. Oh, makes me feel sick. And
you were probably still in absolutely incredible shape.
I was still a size 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's really problematic in and of itself. But that was the best that I could do at that time because that was my own lens, and I can look back now and say I would never do that again. But at the time, I didn't know any better, and I thought people were relating to it. Other thin girls were saying, "Oh, I feel like this too," and I was catering to a certain niche of thin women who struggled with their body image, and that's not, again, what I would do now. But at the time I thought, I'm getting all of this validation of people saying I feel the same way, so I must be doing something good. Whereas now I know better and I'm trying to do better.
I've been trying to be mindful myself because I've put on a bit of weight in the last 8 weeks. I've not trained as much as I normally do. I've not eaten well. I've had a lot of stress with work, some stuff going on Christmas as well. And I'm 5 or 6 kilos heavier. But I unawarely sometimes will go around someone that generally is overweight and like clinically unwell. God, I'm overweight at the moment. I'm so heavy at the moment. And it seems a bit insensitive to them, doesn't it? Because they're probably looking at me going, if you're overweight, then I'm...
There's a couple of things there, right? One is that we can never assume that someone in a larger body feels negative about their body because they might be happy. And also we can't assume that someone in a larger body is inherently less healthy because that's also not necessarily the case, although it might be. It's not always the case. So that's one thing. The other thing is what's interesting is you justifying the change in your body. And that's a really interesting thing because
I do it all the time.
Yeah. And that's so common. And so I'm the same. I've probably gained about 5 or 8 kilos. I don't know. I don't weigh myself in the same sort of time frame as you. And I'm very mindful when I show up on social media of not saying my body's changed. I'm not justifying it, but it's inherent in us to, what we're doing is we're saying, if I say this first, I'm protecting myself from then they're not going to think it. If I say, I'm a bit overweight right now, they're not going to go away and be like, Ty's gained weight.
Yeah.
And it's a self-protection mechanism, and it's interesting it's interesting.
I do it a lot. So I'm going to, my mate's been trying to get me to go to a CrossFit class for months and months and months. And I messaged him yesterday when I landed saying, I'm going to come next week, mate, but I'm overweight, I'm unfit, and I'm weak.
So now he won't say it.
3. I've said it straight away, right? Because it's like the 8 Mile, you know, the Eminem film?
Yeah.
I've kind of taken all of their power away. If I turn up and they go, oh, that Ty turned up, he was rubbish, he couldn't lift this, couldn't do that, I've kind of already taken it away. I've not trained for 8 weeks. You know, that like kind of initial, I don't know why we do that though.
We're apologising for the way that, we're also apologising for the way that we show up. And that comes back to that assertive language of, don't apologise. Like, there's nothing wrong with your body. Like, why are you basically saying, oh, I'm sorry that I've gained a little bit of weight. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's ludicrous that we feel that we have to do it, but it is that self-protection thing because we're so scared of what people will think.
So part of it's a protection from an outside perspective, but what if you genuinely feel, like I genuinely feel, I've just been skiing, as I said to you, I landed yesterday. When I went skiing last year, I was at a real peak time of training for me. So I was training twice a day, I was eating well, and I was never out of breath, no leg pain, nothing, absolutely smashed it. I went this time, Jesus, my legs are on fire, I'm out of breath, my heart rate's through the roof, so I'm genuinely feeling not as able than I was previously. So that's factual. That's not me being, and I need to work on that.
Yeah, but why can you not just work on that and
Not tell everyone.
This is the thing. It's like the more we talk about our bodies, the more we give other people the okay to comment on our bodies, and the more we talk about our bodies, A, it's boring as hell to talk about dieting and bodies and shit like that. But B, we're saying it's okay for you to make judgment. My worth is based on the way that I look, or your perception of me is based on the way that I look. I don't want people to think of me as, oh, she's got a banging body. I mean, you can think it in your head, but that's not what I want people to remember me for. I want them to remember what comes out of my mouth, or like my energy. And whenever you say something about your own body, you're saying that's the forefront here. It's about my body. And why would you want that?
No, you're right. You're stopping to think about it like that, isn't it? What do you think the biggest misconceptions are in nutrition and healthy eating?
I mean, right now that people on podcasts know what they're talking about, and I recognise the hypocrisy and irony in this, but right now there are certain podcasts, which I don't have anything against the specific podcasts, but there are platforming individuals that are really bad at nutrition advice, and they're not nutritionists, they're not academics, they're not practitioners, they're people that have books, or they're people that are PTs that have like a certain thing to spin, and they're giving out nutrition advice, and it's awful. And the types, and they're the biggest podcasts that are going to millions of people. And then I'll get in 1 week of a podcast being released, 50 questions about the same thing. And I could think, this person's followed me for 5 years and they really got the grasp of this. And then they ask me a question about what they heard on this podcast. And it's like, oh my God, you've just undone all of this work this person's done. But the actual like physical stuff is things like, don't eat processed foods, eat red meat, carnivore stuff, like liver king.
Yeah.
That seems
Liver
to be,
king.
oh my God, what a lols.
I think he's quite funny to watch. I mean, as in from a comedy perspective.
But that if he
but
stood
he's
up and
deadly
was
serious.
like, if he was a parody account, you'd be like, oh, that's really funny. Like you'd love it.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you're legit eating just raw liver and having blood coming from your mouth and saying that this is optimal way for health. And then you've got other people who have podcasts that talk about their own diet narrative. So a certain podcast host will say, oh, the carnivore diet healed my chronic pain or whatever it is. That's a really common one right now. And none of that is true. And I don't know if it's like some sort of fight back against veganism or something. I don't know. A high intake of red meat is associated with poorer health outcomes. It is. Like the research is there.
Oh, you're saying it is?
It is.
Okay.
It is. And
really?
Yeah. And also processed meat, obviously.
Processed, I get.
Also things like, I don't know if you've seen like the conversation around people say you can't eat seed oils. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Really common. Again, absolute bullshit.
Really?
Yeah, bullshit.
I stopped buying it.
Well, you can have it. It's actually, if you look at the research around like omega-6 fatty acids, which is one of the reasons they say, because it's the way that seed oils are cooked, the way that they break down, they're saying is highly inflammatory. But if you look at the consumption of seed oils within the context of a healthy diet, they actually have beneficial outcomes on things like cardiovascular disease risk. It's the complete opposite of what the research is. But again, people are just saying, oh, research says this. And then you've got hundreds of influencers saying, oh, I went to Whole Foods and they actually cooked my food in seed oil, and so I had to make them do it again. And it's just ludicrous, some of this stuff. And people like who are evidence-based don't stand a bloody chance because we're all crap at communicating it. So it doesn't get out there. And the lack of nuance is much easier to sell.
I mean, there's a lot of conflicting messages out there.
Yeah.
If someone's new and they're new to it all and they've come onto social media and you've got, say, you on one side of the spectrum, Liver King on the other, and then, I mean, I saw you post something the other day on your story.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
About a guest that Steve Bartlett had on. Mm-hmm. I think his name was Max, I don't know how you pronounce it, Lugari, whatever his name is. And about red flags on nutrition advice.
Yeah.
What was it that he said that?
I think
It
he
riled
said
you right up. You'd written
it really
something.
did rile me. And again, this is not a podcast specific thing. Like this is I like that podcast, so it's not about that. It's just the
I'm just
people,
using that as because
that guest's nutrition advice is awful. I can't remember all the things he said. He said one was something to do with
was it the calories? Was it that guy? No, he had
no,
another
that
one.
was another one. One thing he said was as your waist gets bigger, your brain gets smaller.
What? I've not listened to that one.
That was like a soundbite. That was spectacular. One was he based his nutrition advice on the early death of his mum, and he said, "Oh, that made me train in nutrition," or something like that. Often, when you relate something purely to your own story, or when it's nutrition, you've got to be a bit skeptical. It's the same as certain people who say carnivore diet changed my chronic illness. It's like that might have done that for you, but realistically, the research says that's not what happens. So when you relate it to yourself, it's a bit of a red flag. He also had a couple of books, another big red flag. Lots of legit people have books, but when you have a certain book that's got a certain narrative, you've got something to sell, you're going to be very good at ignoring all of the other evidence because it doesn't fit your narrative.
It reminds me of, was it Men's Health magazines? Yeah. So Men's Health, I remember when I started like my gym journey, 18 years old, go and do your weights and then you sit on a cross trainer or whatever you're sitting on. It's loads of men's health magazines. And obviously they need to sell a new issue every month, right? So every month it was a different diet or a different ab exercise contradicting the one from the month before. And I remember saying like, who the fuck's writing this and stuff?
Yeah, because you have to have something to say, right? Moderation is boring. Yeah. You can't say every week or every month on Men's Health,
just be consistent.
Eat tons of plant-based foods, eat enough protein, lots of fibre and whole grains, and maybe some essential fats as well. Okay. Like what?
Do you eat meat?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. Well,
4 burgers a week. That's it.
Yeah, casual. I grew up vegetarian, so I don't naturally eat meat for myself, and then I started eating meat when I was competing because lean protein, and now don't love it. So for me, as much as individual environmental stuff is minimal, the impact it has, I don't love meat. So I just, for the environment, would rather just not really eat it. And if I really want it, I'll have it. But I'm pretty much vegetarian.
I think I could be a veggie. I don't think I could be a vegan.
It's quite easy these days, though. There's like meat alternatives, milk alternatives, although I love an egg.
But the other thing, like this goes back to research, and I put these up because I don't know you don't know what to believe. I don't know what to believe. I watch one thing that says something. I watch something else. I go to do my own research on Google, but there's 100 studies all contradicting each other. Mm-hmm. So which is the correct research? Like where would you look? If someone was going online now to look for a diet, that annoys me as well, when they're all labelled as different diets.
Yeah.
The best diet, one of my original PTs used to say, the best diet is the one you can maintain, as in consistently do. Yeah. That's the best diet for you, he used to say to me.
But even then, if it's a fat loss diet, you don't want to be doing it forever. So you don't want to have to necessarily do it forever. But like as a diet, as in we look at like everything that you're eating and drinking as a whole, as opposed to a fat loss diet, for sure.
I did keto a lot when I was younger.
Did you? How was that?
It worked really well for me.
Until I didn't, which is the problem.
It worked. So keto worked really well for me when I was on gear.
Shocking. Shocking.
And for a short period of time. So if I had like a holiday coming up with the lads and I wanted to quickly shred, it worked really, really well because I could maintain it, I could function well, and it just burnt the fat off me.
Well, it's just a calorie deficit. The only reason it leads to fat loss is because of calories.
I know that now, but I didn't at the time.
Oh yeah, I know.
I now know, and also now I know my body well, and I actually function better with carbs.
Again, shocking revelation that carbs actually give you energy. Who knew? Who knew?
Yeah, but you're not taught that, are you? Everyone's told you to eat protein and fat when you're younger to get lean.
Absolutely. And listen, I've done juice cleanses before. I've done an alkaline diet. I've done like semi-starvation. I've done it all. Like there's no judgment. We've all done it. But realistically now, it's like in terms of legit nutrition information, it's really, really tough. And that's because everything that I just said in terms of what to put on Men's Health, like that's obviously it's more complex than that, but that's sort of the fundamentals. Add in a calorie deficit if you want to lose fat. Add in calories if you want to gain weight.
Yeah, I mean, but one of my original PTs, as I said to you, his name's Gary Hill. I've had him on the podcast actually. He's been peddling that from the beginning about just calorie deficit. He used to say to me, Ty, don't overcomplicate it. Just look at calories in versus calories out. He said, I don't promote this for health. He said, but if you were if you knew that 1,800 calories would get you abs and you had 1,800 calories of chocolate a day, yeah, you'd be unhealthy, but you'd get leaner.
Yeah.
As in you'd lose the weight. But as in like from a real basic perspective, not talking about overall health. Yeah. Then later on in life, obviously James was shouting it a lot as well. But that's kind of my like go-to. If I'm stuck and I'm like, I want to get leaner or I want to put on some weight, I just think, right, well, eat more or eat less.
Yeah. And listen, like you said, that's for fat loss or weight gain, right? And we want to think about it less just like that's important, but then we also want to think about health. So we never want to reduce food to just calories, because actually food quality does matter and macros do matter and micronutrients do matter. All of that does still matter. But I think on top of that, it's like a lot of us we don't make food decisions cognitively. We're not like, okay, I'm a robot and I know that I need to eat X many grams of protein, this many servings of fruit and vegetables, etc. That's not the reason that our country or our, westernized world is struggling with obesity challenges. Mm-hmm. It's because it's not the cognitive side of things. It's food accessibility. It's to some degree education. It's the emotional reasons why we eat. All of those things are actually the reasons that we've got issues with our health. It's not because one of us super privileged people with access to all of this information, went keto or didn't go keto. Like we're such a minority of like, our shit doesn't really matter. We're like the walking well. We're just like, oh, well, let's try this, let's try that. That's really not what the problem is.
And we've got this culture at the moment where I think everyone's on a form of diet. What you just said resonated with me. I've not actually heard one person in my life go, I'm just eating healthy. Mm-hmm. In terms of like without a goal of gaining muscle or losing fat or looking a certain way, that they're just eating healthy. Even me, I'm frightened of that. Like, everyone tells me avocados are healthy, or this is a superfood, or that's a superfood. But then I look at the calorie of it and I go, I can't keep eating that every day. It might be healthy for my insides, but I'm going to be fat.
Yeah, that's quite common.
So what do I do? And that's because if I look at my mum and dad, like, so our background is Turkish, Kurdish, Armenian, and Sicilian. So a mongrel. But they eat intuitively. And I'm not saying they're necessarily healthy because they've got loads of hereditary issues and loads of issues, but they eat when they're hungry and they move when they move every day. And my dad's always like, son, eat what you want. Just make sure you exercise. Eat and he eats loads of pomegranate, eats loads of like what we deem in the Western world as superfoods. Mm-hmm. But for him, it's like a natural part of his diet. I only have that stuff if it fits within my macros.
So super common.
But that's shit, no?
Why do you not trust yourself to eat intuitively to your hunger and your fullness?
Because I eat too much.
But if you were eating, so right, then if you put in place, like, why do you eat too much? Is there certain times that you eat too much?
However, I'm going to contradict myself. If I don't watch what I'm eating and don't have some structure to how I eat, my general day looks like this. I accidentally fast most of the morning. I'll have a coffee or two. I'll probably have a big meal around 2:00. And then I'll have a few snacks, another big meal, and then I'll have shit food in front of the TV, cookies, tea, whatever it might be. But actually, if I look at it, I'm going to contradict myself. Over the last 8 weeks, I've been eating like that, horrendously, to my normal standards. I've gained 5 kilos in weight, and then I haven't budged. Mm-hmm. So arguably now, I'm eating a maintenance calorie without realizing I'm doing it intuitively. But I just think my timing's incorrect. I eat around stress. I eat around work.
So that's the thing. That's the thing. So you can eat intuitively if you manage your stress, if you have other coping strategies for stress away from food, if you take an inclusive approach to your nutrition and you're quite mindful of, I'm going to eat quite regularly, I'm going to make sure that my meals are protein with lots of fruit and vegetables in there, pomegranate in there, all of those things are in there. And I've got all of my other coping strategies and stuff in place for the reasons that I do tend to overeat, then you're much more likely to be able to quote unquote eat intuitively. The other thing is, maybe the weight that you're at right now is like your healthiest settling point, and actually what you're trying to do is maintain a body composition that is lower than what is optimal for you, and maybe you would thrive at this weight. I mean, from what you said, skiing, right. I don't know, but
no, you are right, because I'm naturally I perform better in any sports that I do when I'm team soft belly. That's genuine. Like I can run, I can swim, I can fight, I can lift, I can do everything a lot better when I'm fit, my cardiovascular system is fit, but I'm generally a bit chunkier. When I try to go lean to look a certain way for a photo or a holiday or a certain thing, I'm not very good.
And that's the reality for a lot of people, which is why they struggle with their relationship with food in some way. And that's what I would say with you in terms of that is a bit of a relationship with food struggle thing. Because it's taken away from you living necessarily the most optimal life and being super present because you're a bit preoccupied with with food. Maybe you'd have more energy if you started eating breakfast. All of these things, right? It's a little bit disordered. And one of the key reasons for that is people want to have this quote unquote settling point and they want it to be lower than what it realistically is. Like realistically, I don't weigh myself, but I'm probably about 15 kilos more than I was when I was competing at my leanest.
I could believe that.
Ish, yeah. And even maybe a couple of
kilos. Which is
kilos.
insane, if I may say, that there's 15 kilo that can come off you. Like from
still be alive.
Just from like a looking at you perspective.
Yeah, but like even from IFS, I'm probably a bit bigger than I was when we first met. And it's like, because right now, and this is the thing too, right now, this is where I'm functioning optimally. I'm eating a little bit more than usual. I'm cold and I'm enjoying food and like, that's fine. I'm really thriving in my work and all this stuff. And right now my body is the size and maybe in somewhere when I'm moving around a lot more and naturally a bit less hungry. And the point is that when we're trying to actively control our body, that's when it's a lot harder to have a more intuitive relationship with food. And there's times that that's important. If you have a fat loss goal, maybe you're in a larger body and it's good for your health, whatever, then that's important to manipulate those things. But realistically, if you're thriving and you're healthy and you're fit and you're training well and your rest of your life is great and you're enjoying your food, it's like there's no problem there.
Do you think mindfulness is just another trend?
No.
Oh, that was cool.
No. I love it. I love it. No, I don't think so. I think for a lot of people it is. A lot of people are using mindful eating and mindfulness as like some sort of tick box of I'm so spiritual and I'm so whatever. Like for those people it probably is a trend, but mindfulness is not a new age thing. Like it's deep rooted in Buddhism and philosophy, and it's actually really evidence-based too in terms of supporting, obviously in my realm it's things like supports relationships with food and body image and things like that. And we know that people who binge eat, for example, if you practice mindfulness, you're much less likely to binge eat and overeat and things like that. It's super impactful.
Really?
It's hugely impactful. And that's through things like meditation, mindful eating practices, just being more mindfully aware day to day.
I just think all of that stuff really blew up since COVID. Or maybe I've only noticed it since then. Yeah. But prior to that, I felt like it wasn't a thing. Everyone was on the hamster wheel trying to earn a load of money.
But isn't that great?
Yeah. Well, it's great. It's been great for me. Commercially, it's been horrendous. But personally, from a personal development thing, it's been nice. It's been good to kind of reset, start again, re-fall in love with the things that I enjoyed doing. I'm a bit shit at the moment because I've kind of now stuck into two worlds. The person I was during that COVID element and then a little bit of the person I was prior. They're butting heads at the moment.
I know what you mean.
Like, it's like, am I this guy or am I this guy?
You can be both.
Sometimes I have issues with that. If you could go back now and speak to your 15, 16-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Do you know what? I wouldn't change anything. As much as I have grieved a lot of the time and energy that I lost to my eating issues, I love where I am now. So I wouldn't say, cry more, feel more. I wouldn't say any of those things. I would probably just say, it's all going to pass and you're going to be really happy. Just as a bit of reassurance, and then be like, good luck, friend.
Good luck, friend.
You got 15, 20 years to wait. Hang
in there.
Yeah, just that. Like one of my favourite affirmations, if you will, is everything is transient. Mm-hmm. I think impermanence is just incredible, and that's obviously deep rooted in Buddhism too, of just everything is going to pass and hopefully we'll be okay. And if it's not, you will also be okay in the end.
Yeah, I love that. I think Tom Hanks, is it Tom Hanks? There's that TikTok from a podcast where they're all sat around and he says, this too shall pass.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really powerful clip. It says like, I'll send it to you. He's sat around with all other actors and they're saying to him, if you could give yourself one bit of advice, what would you say? And he says, this too shall pass. He said, so if you think you know it all and it's going really well, this too shall pass.
Yes.
If it's going really bad, this too shall pass. It's an amazing clip.
Do you know what? And I think that's the thing too, if people think, oh, well, I'll just use that kind of this too shall pass in the dark times. It's like, use it in the good times, because when you're thriving I'm sorry, but that's not going to last. Like something is going to happen. So if you're running around not being present in it and like not embracing it and not being grateful for it, then you're going to regret that when you're in the dark times. Sometimes we also kind of rush through the good times because we think, well, it's going to end anyway. So I just need to kind of just like, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for it to go wrong. That doesn't make the going wrong any better. You may as well sit in the joy of what it is right now because it's not going to last forever.
No, you're right.
And you don't know how long the next dark time is going to last.
Have you been in some dark spots when you're having your eating disorders?
For sure.
What was the darkest? Do you remember it? Is there a particular point?
Yeah, there was. I actually wrote an article about this the other day when I was in this relationship and I was 31. And we'd had many issues, and one of the issues was control. It was emotional abuse. One of the issues was control. And I'd woken up on Valentine's Day and we'd been having big arguments, and he'd left a note for Valentine's Day that said something like, we're going for dinner here, wear this thing that I like. And then there was some like sex things that were related to like that side of things, control side of things, which, by the way, all for when you're not in an abusive relationship and that's consensual and all of these things. And I remember waking up and just bursting out crying, and I was like, it's Valentine's Day, and he's done what effectively, if I was in a relationship now, I don't know, I might quite like that. But it was so like my whole body had like this contractive state of like, what the hell is this? I can't even fathom going for dinner with my boyfriend. Like, this is horrific. And although that wasn't the worst time in our relationship, there's holes in the walls, there's all of these things, which were obviously more traumatic. That specific moment for me, I remember phoning my friend and being like, I don't know how to get out of this. And she was like, just pack your stuff and leave. And I packed my stuff and I drove up to Scotland.
Wow.
And stayed with my mum. And that was when I had the turning point of like, that's enough. And I think that was really, really dark. But like I do think you need those times to then move through them, right?
Appreciate the other. And like, you never really know how strong you are either. So it's the only option you've got.
Yeah. For sure.
I always say this, even when I speak sometimes with my wife, and she's like, how'd you do that? Or, how can you be like this in a certain situation? And I was like, well, you've never put yourself in that situation to know what you're capable of. Mm. Like, we're all capable of a lot more than we do.
Yeah.
If you look, what's the, what I find interesting? You talk very openly about the ex-relationships with no fear of comeback.
So it took me a long time.
I was going to say, because earlier we were talking about obviously the fear of...
It took me a long time because, first of all, I didn't want to look like someone who would badmouth a person. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens a lot with women. We just want to look like we're not bitter, jealous, angry ex-girlfriends. And so I stayed quiet a lot. I was also threatened a lot in one of the relationships that ended, that if I wasn't civil and I wasn't complicit in keeping that the way that it was, that certain secrets about me would be told to other people and it would ruin my career, all of these things, which it wouldn't. But like at the time I was really in it. And so I stayed quiet and I maintained relationships with some of these people afterwards. And that was because I was so under the spell of a narcissistic, in a couple of occasions, narcissistic situation where it's like a trauma bond of like, that felt like it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, so I'm 36 now. It's taken me it's only in the last year that I felt able to talk about at least one of these situations more freely. And even then I'm very mindful of what I'm saying and I would never name these people because one, I don't think that that's helpful to anyone involved. Mm-hmm. But I actually learned from this. The partner who my ex had after me, he was domestically violent towards her, physically violent towards her. The relationship I had at the time with them, the two of them, was he'd asked me to keep her out of my life, block her on everything because she liked to lie and do all of these things. And I believed it. And then only in the last few years, I wrote an email that was to my email list about that situation. Again, never named him, but more from a case of, this is actually what gaslighting looks like. And this is what sexual abuse looks like. And all of these things, coercive control, in the hope that I wish that I'd read it. I wish someone had said to me, that's actually, you're being abused here. And I wish someone had said that to me. So it came from that. And this girl who's a couple of years younger than me, messaged me and she said, I know who that's about and this is what happened to me and I'm in therapy. And the guilt that I felt for that was huge, because I just thought, if I hadn't been so quiet, if I hadn't been so under the spell, then maybe she would have reached out to me and maybe she would have left that relationship and maybe that wouldn't have happened to her. And I was pissed at myself and I was upset for a while, and I thought, I feel really guilty for that. And so now I try and speak up a bit more, because I think, okay, well, if he wants to do something about it, that's fine. He's got a hell of a lot more to lose than I do. And if that can help someone else, and that's great.
That. Yeah. It's giving people power, isn't it? Other people.
Yeah.
To know that they can make change.
Yeah. Because you just don't know, like, you don't know the ripple effect of, you think, well, and my friend was almost like, one day you'll feel okay to talk about it. And I thought, maybe, but I don't think so. I just want a peaceful life. So I'm just not, I don't like drama. And that's the horrible thing of saying, I'm not the drama by that, talking about that's what actually happened. But before, I definitely felt like if I talk about it, I'm causing drama. And I don't want to be that girl. And that's awful.
Yeah. Do you feel that because of that relationship and a few others, that you're now maybe noticing red flags that maybe aren't there? Because you're kind of overlooking for certain behavioural patterns that... You see what I mean?
Yeah, possibly. I don't think so. I mean, I'm very much take everyone at face value.
Okay.
I'm never someone that, if I'm with someone, I trust you 100%. I don't care what your history is, what my history is. And maybe that's really naive and maybe that's an issue in itself. I don't know. But I take everyone at face value, and what they tell me I trust until I've got a reason with that person to tell me otherwise. So I don't think so. My thing's always been kind of ignoring the red flags. So I'm mindful of them now, and I think I'm doing a bit better with that. But I don't know. Do you ever know?
I don't know. My dad always used to say to me, like, have faith in humanity. So, like, always give them your trust until they give you not the reason not to trust. Because he said it's a very lonely place to live without, if you're forever like paranoid, it's a horrendous place to live.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm also a big believer of everyone's doing the best they can from where they are. And so with my past relationships, I don't hold now anger or resentment or upset towards those situations, because that's the best that person could do in that moment with everything, all the tools that he had. And that can sometimes sound a little bit condescending, but I think it's a compassionate way of thinking of just like, that's a shame that was the best that he could do. And I forgive that, because forgiveness is important.
Well, it's you, isn't it? It's peaceful for you.
Yeah.
Even from that perspective.
Yeah.
If you could ban one piece of misinformation, what would it be? Right now, from the world. If there's one thing that no one could say again about any of the stuff that you specialise in.
Ooh. This is very niche to the stuff that I specialise in. But probably diets, hold on, let me think of how I word this. Diets don't heal your relationship with food, or diets don't stop you from binge eating, something like that. Often we think that our problem with food is just going on another diet and having more willpower. And there's this narrative of like, if I have more self-control, if I have more willpower, then I just won't overeat and I just won't binge eat, and then I'll be able to lose fat. And realistically, for like that, some people, it is just a bit of self-control. It's like, I didn't need to have those biscuits last night. But for a large majority of people, that is stemming from an emotional reason, or an inherent like dysregulation in us. And a diet just sticks a plaster over it, and it does the same thing every single time. And I'm for dieting, by the way, in certain situations. I'm not against dieting, but it sticks a plaster on it, and then you diet for 6 weeks, and then you regain the weight again. And you're like, why have I regained the weight? Why am I still overeating? Why do I have no willpower? The problem is not your willpower. And I wish that people stop peddling the narrative of you just need to try harder. It's not that. It's so many other things underneath that.
I'm stuck in that cycle. So I'll eat very well. I'll diet for 8 to 12 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, get to a really good spot, completely stop and go into like my intuitive, I guess, eating, but overeating. But since I've been talking to you, I've been thinking about it. There's peaks and troughs throughout the year. And I think about when work's the busiest, when the stressful times have happened, you know, when certain things have happened in my life and what I've been doing. And you're right, it's actually probably nothing to do with the food at all. If I look at the periods in which I'm in a certain position in my head, or eating a certain way, or training a certain way, it's got no link to the food.
And it can be really insightful to look at it and then say, okay, well, what was going on? Well, what would I do next time if that happened? How would I change it? Like, would I still, because there's nothing wrong with your body going up and down either. Like, that's totally normal. Like we were saying, you kind of got seasons and that's fine. But if it's like quite extreme, or it's every single time you lose weight, it's immediately back on. It's like, well, there's something else. There's a reason for that. I
blood test every 6 months. I'm on testosterone replacement therapy. So what I tend to do is have the blood test, and I use that as a bit of a marker, look at my fat, lipids and all that kind of stuff and see, right, I know I'm eating loads of sugar at the moment, so I'm expecting all them to come back red, and they are. Or I know I'm eating not as much processed sugar, or whatever it's called, refined sugar, is it? Is that the correct term?
Or added sugar.
Added sugar, whatever it is, that should come back black. If it doesn't, then I sort of think, well, what else is going on? Why is it not? What's next for you, Emilia? What you got planned? What you got coming up?
I don't really know.
What an honest answer.
Yeah. I honestly don't know where I am with business right now. I'm continuing to grow my coaching, continuing to grow my mentoring, continuing to grow EIQ Nutrition, which is something I run with Emma Storey-Gordon.
Yep.
Personally, I'm traveling quite a bit more. I'm spending a lot of time in Austin. So if I can do that with immigration, then I'll be doing that for the rest of the year. But realistically for me, my priority is family. I say that knowing that I've just said I'm going to go to Austin, but that's within the context of my family situations. And my priority is making sure that I can always put my family first at this point in time, should I need to do that at any time. And that's kind of, so I don't have huge scaling plans or take over the world plans or anything like that. It's like, okay, I want to continue all of these things, still be happy, continue like dating and all of these things, but also know that if at the drop of a hat, I can be like, that stuff has to drop for a second and I can go and do my other stuff.
I rate that.
It's not very grand, but that's the
reality. I like that.
Of it.
I think it's very authentic, because a lot of the time when you ask questions like that to people, even when people ask me, I spill out a load of shit that probably isn't even true because you want it to sound a certain way. But yeah, no, I rate that. Well, why did they kick you out of America?
Well, immigration, you can't stay there for that long. Like you have to get visas, obviously, and ESTAs and stuff like that.
ESTA 2 years, no?
You can only do 3 months and come back for 3 months and then go back.
Oh, every time I've got an ESTA, I've only gone on holiday and then come back, so it's never really affected me.
I was supposed to go back for 3 months this time, and then they said I can only go back for 1. So I had to leave after a month.
Oh, dear.
I know. And so
what's the process now? You have to get a new one.
I can be in the UK for 3 months and then go back for 3, or I can try and get a visa, and then I can stay
like
for
a
longer.
green card almost.
Not a green card, it's just a 6 month traveller visa thing.
I would want to go to Austin.
It's great.
Texas.
It's great. It's like...
Only because of Joe Rogan.
Of course. Well, do you know who...
He's there already?
I think so. Do you know who Lex Friedman is?
Yes.
Well, we saw him jogging around, but I didn't know who he was, but I was with someone and he was like, oh, that's Lex Friedman. And I was like, oh, great. And he's like, that's amazing. Are you sure?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a really cool place.
He's a big dog.
It's a cool place.
I think he's the one that had Kanye West on the podcast. Do you remember the clips that went viral of Kanye saying certain things about certain people?
Definitely do.
Yeah, that was on his podcast. He's really good. You should listen to some of his stuff, because he's not just a normal podcaster. He's like a neuroscientist or something that's then started podcasting. He's extremely intelligent.
Okay, but are they 4 hours long?
Yeah,
this is what puts me off.
Yeah, that's why the only time I listen to Joe is on a plane. It's the only time I can spare 4 hours. I prefer like an hour and a half max.
It's just a lot. It's a lot.
It's too long, and you can't consume it anyway.
Exactly.
Too much info.
Great.
Emilia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been very interesting.
That was fun.